Comedy and music, they're like chocolate and peanut butter. Great by themselves, amazing together. There is a catchier way of saying that, but it's copyrighted, I think, and Reese's isn't paying me. I'm Thom Tran, and this is Comedy on 11, my web show and podcast about comedy and music, and today we're going to list some pretty great musical comedians. Now, right off the bat, this isn't a ranking, just a list, because like comedy, rankings are subjective. Also, this is a list of solo comedians who are known for using music in their act, or are famous for a comedy song. We've got comedy duos and groups and a list of their own coming up soon. So, here we go. First up, Fred Armisen. This Saturday Night Live star isn't just a funny sketch comedian. Fred Armisen eventually played drums for and was the band leader on Late Night with Seth Meyers, another SNL alum. He's a talented musician and was nominated for a Grammy in 2019 for his comedy album Stand Up for Drummers. And he created the IFC show Portlandia. Next up, Rodney Carrington. Weird fact, I was a country music radio DJ in the early 2000s. I know, that's hard to get a hold of. That's when I discovered Rodney Carrington, whose stand-up comedy and neo-traditional country style gave us a single called A Letter to My Penis, which I contend is still one of the funniest comedy music songs released this century. Carrington released 7 albums, with 4 of them charting in the top 20, a couple of greatest hits records, and a live album called Come On, Laugh You Bastards. He eventually landed a sitcom called Rodney about a guy that leaves a job he hates to become a stand-up comedian, because that always works out. The series ran on ABC for 2 seasons and was co-created by Don Rio, Rick Schwartzlander, and Damon Wayans of the Wayans family and In Living Color fame. Next up, Weird Al Yankovic. When it comes to comedy parody songs, Alfred Matthew Weird Al Yankovic is the undisputed king. The Southern California native scored 5 Grammys, a Primetime Emmy, and top 10 charting single with his song Eat It, the popular parody of Michael Jackson's Beat It. He's not a traditional stand-up comedian, but he can't be left off this list. His parody songs of mainstream pop and rock songs often brought even more success or renewal to the original artist and song. Some of his big hits include Like a Surgeon, a parody of Madonna's Like a Virgin, his Ode to Ice Cream with I Love Rocky Road, covering Joan Jett's I Love Rock and Roll, and Amish Paradise, which initially caused some static with original artist Coolio over his parody of Gangster's Paradise, but eventually they squashed that beef. Kurt Cobain, the late frontman of grunge legends Nirvana, even once said that having Weird Al parody one of their songs was a sign that they made it. Next up, Denis Leary. Not typically known for using music in his stand-up, this New England ball-buster was kind of the inspiration for this list, because Denis Leary's runaway MTV hit of a comedy song and music video was where I discovered musical comedy. His 4-chord song called Asshole, about a guy who is, well, an asshole, played on MTV almost non-stop in 1993 when a young Thom was discovering music, tapping away to Van Halen riffs and dreaming of the day when I'd own an Ernie Ball Music Man Eddie Van Halen's signature guitar. The song was penned by Leary and co-writer Chris Phillips, and it was the only single released from his album No Cure for Cancer in 1993. The song was a certified hit in Australia, charting at number 2 down under, and was voted number 1 on the Triple J Hottest 100 poll of 1993 because Aussies love assholes, apparently. Next up, Reggie Watts. Reggie Watts uses his voice, a looper pedal, and sometimes a keyboard to deliver some hilarious, oftentimes improvised comedy disinformation, as he calls it. Watts discovered the Line 6 DL4 delay modeler while on tour with Wayne Horowitz's 4+1 ensemble because the Roland Space Echo tape delay he was using was too big to take on the tour. That one's for my gear nerds. He started adding comedic elements to his records and later went on to create shorts for College Humor. In 2012, he landed on IFC's series Comedy Bang Bang with Scott Aukerman. Then he went on to collaborate with Sarah Silverman, Michael Cera, and the comedy team of Tim and Eric. He's appeared on dozens of movies and TV shows, including The Venture Brothers, The Electric Company, The Tonight Show with Conan O'Brien, and many, many others, lending his comedic, vocal, and musical talents to sketches. And in 2016, he released a Netflix special called Spatial. Next on the list, Bo Burnham. Bo Burnham accomplished more by himself during the thing in 2020 than most production teams I've worked with. Bo started writing and releasing comedy songs and videos on YouTube in 2006 and became a viral hit. He'd eventually released his first comedy music album in 2008 called Bo for Show, then another in 2009 simply called Bo Burnham. He'd eventually start performing at stand-up comedy clubs and writing and starring in his own films. And while the world was locked down because of the global quarantine, Bo wrote, recorded, and filmed an entire special without a production crew called Inside that dropped on Netflix in 2021. At the same time, I managed to finally get a guitar pick out of an acoustic guitar that I dropped in there in 2007. Next up, Steve Martin. As of 2025, Steve Martin is still crushing it at the age of 79 with his hit show Only Murders in the Building on Hulu. He's made a staggering 27 appearances on Saturday Night Live and guest hosted the show 16 times as of this writing. His musical comedy sketches include the iconic King Tut on SNL, his turn as the masochistic dentist Dr. Oren Scrivello, DDS, in the motion picture adaptation of Little Shop of Horrors, and his numerous appearances with his banjo on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He was a writer on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, the Glenn Campbell Good Time Hour, and the Sonny and Cher Show. Martin was one of the top stand-up comedians of the 1970s, touring arenas and winning Grammys and Emmys before going on to star in iconic comedies like The Jerk, The Three Amigos, Roxanne, Father of the Bride, and so many others. Steve Martin came back to stand-up comedy, opening for Jerry Seinfeld on a series of dates, and then did a tour with his friend and frequent co-star Martin Short in 2016 before releasing a Netflix special with Short in 2018. Next up, Craig Robinson. Craig Robinson grew up with music in the house, raised by a music teacher mom on the south side of Chicago, not too far from the famous Second City Improv Studio, where he studied improv and acting. He also received a Bachelor of Music degree from Illinois State University, so it's no wonder he blends comedy and music together so seamlessly. He made appearances on Def Comedy Jam and Comedy Central Presents, showcasing his piano skills and smooth vocals, while his funny lyrics crushed audiences on comedy jams like Take Your Panties Off or his live sing-alongs at comedy clubs. Early on in his career, he performed in a musical comedy duo called Elle Witherspoon and Chucky alongside comedian Jerry Minor, and he's currently playing with his comedic funk pop punk rock band, The Nasty Delicious. You may also know him as Daryl Philbin from the American version of The Office, or his roles in films like Knocked Up, Hot Tub Time Machine, and This Is the End, where he played an exaggerated version of himself. Fun fact, Craig and I jammed together on stage at the Laugh Factory in Hollywood during a live stream that we did when the world shut down for a little while. Next up, Stephen Lynch. Now, Stephen Lynch may be number 2 on this list, but he is the number 1 influence on my musical comedy career in terms of songwriting and style. He's a guitarist, songwriter, comedian, and Tony Award-nominated actor, and his 2000 Comedy Central Presents special is one of the highest-rated episodes of the show in the network's history. His songwriting and lyrics range from fanciful to ridiculous, with styles that can span from rock to medieval troubadours, but it's always funny every time. Favorite tracks include The Craig Machine, classic rock song, and Lullaby, the divorce song. He's released 4 studio albums, 4 live albums, and 2 live concert specials, the most recent being Hello Kalamazoo in 2016. In 2006, Lynch took his comedic and vocal skills to Broadway, starring as Robbie Hart in the Broadway musical The Wedding Singer, the role made famous by Adam Sandler in the 1998 film of the same name. And while we're talking about the Sandman, number 1 on this list of musical stand-up comedians, Adam Sandler. One of the breakout stars of the early 90s Saturday Night Live casts, Adam Sandler's musical contributions to the show and comedy in general are legendary. He spent 5 seasons on SNL before becoming an international comedy juggernaut. I was introduced to the Sandman's work during freshman year of high school during a spring dance. While the rest of the kids were upstairs awkwardly grinding on their barely teenage counterparts, a group of us were in the basement of this Catholic school in Western New York listening to his album, They're All Gonna Laugh at You, and falling all over the floor cracking up. Now, even though most of the album's tracks were sketches and only a few were actual comedy songs, all of them involving food, the record was a huge hit, certified double platinum by the RIAA and gold by Music Canada. He's released 4 other studio albums, contributed to several soundtracks, and has either acted in, written, or produced literally dozens of films, including the iconic Happy Gilmore, Billy Madison, Airheads, The Waterboy, and many, many others. He's still doing stand-up and released a special in 2024 called Adam Sandler, Love You, on Netflix, where he signed a 4-movie, $250 million deal. That's it for the list. Do you have a favorite musical stand-up comic that I missed or don't know about? Let me know in the comments below. And before we go, here's a clip from my Comedy on 11 podcast with my first guest and good friend, Brad Williams.
So here's the key to a good karaoke song. I like to pick songs that are in a key that I could actually hit. I want it that way. There's a lot of Pearl Jam songs where I can do an Eddie Vedder sort of falsetto, like like that's not as good as Eddie Vedder, but it's
in the ballpark.
It's Timu's
The Wish.com.
Wish.com Eddie Vedder. You know, it's not quite, but there.
You can watch the entire episode here on YouTube or listen on your favorite podcatcher of choice, and I'll be dropping new episodes every week talking to my stand-up comedy friends about music, along with more lists. So please like the show, subscribe, and share with your friends, and follow me and the show on Instagram, Threads, or Facebook at _Thom Tran, THOMTRAN, or Comedy on 11 Pod. Don't forget my other show called The Story Behind the Strings, where I go in-depth into my guitar collection and give you all the nerdy gear goodness like specs, pricing, and the story, both historic and personal, of the guitars in my collection. Thanks again, and remember to turn the laughs up to 11.